If you want to take your vocal tracks from sounding like this to sounding like this, then you need to keep watching.
This is a quick Ableton tip.
What is up, YouTube? My name is Jordan, and welcome back to another installment of Quick Ableton Tips. Today, we are going to be talking about vocals and how to get your vocal radio ready and competitive inside of your track. I'm going to walk you through the steps. I'm going to show you the plugins that I use to get there. I'm going to show you the return tracks I use to get there. And what's more is I'm going to make this whole session available for download for a meager $5. So let's skip over to Ableton and I'll show you what I've got going on. All right, guys, here we are in Ableton, and I've got a little bit of a track going. I'm going to play it without vocals to start. It sounds like this. It's a little drum and bass vibe. You know how it is. Cool. Here's the vocal that I'm going to be using inside of that track. Kind of got a bit of a Wilkinson vibe going. If you're into drum and bass, you'll probably know who that is. What we're going to be doing today is I'm going to show you my process for taking this vocal and making it really sparkle inside of the track. Also, something I didn't mention in the intro, all of the plugins used in this session are native Ableton plugins. So there are no third-party plugins at all. So if you do want to support the channel and spend the $5 on this session, you will be able to run the session with no third-party plugins whatsoever. It is all Ableton stock plugins. If you have a current working version of Ableton Live Suite, you will be able to run this session, guaranteed. Invariably, the first thing that usually comes to mind is tuning. Now, with this one, I actually didn't really find the tuning to be that off. Here's auto shift off. It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Okay, and here's with it on. It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Not really hearing that much of a difference there, so I'm going to leave it off. First thing I typically do is get rid of low end. I've got an EQ8 high pass filter, just getting rid of any mud that might be down there. So here's with and without. It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Here's without. It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. So we're clipping off a little bit of that low end. There is a little bit of that getting attenuated, but a lot of that is going to come back with the later processing that we're doing. So let's move on. The next thing, we're going to kind of go from subtle to extreme when it comes to a lot of these choices and effects. Next thing we've got is the saturator. That sounds like this. It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. And here's without. It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. I find this is very subtle in what it does. It really just kind of opens up the high end a little bit, gets us a little bit more consistent in terms of the dynamics. It's not really giving us too much compression overall, as saturation often does. We're trying to get the ranges to really play nice with each other, and I find saturation is a really good option for leveling out your sound but not overdoing it. And this is the key, is that you don't really want to overdo saturation too early on if you're trying to maintain a clean sounding vocal. And so next we're just going to move on to some very gentle compression. Okay, and we've got a glue compressor for that. Sounds like this. It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Okay, so a lot of those S's and T's are starting to come out a little bit more. And like I said, this is a gentle compressor, right? So I've got 30 milliseconds on the attack and I've got, 600 milliseconds on the release. So yeah, releasing and attacking very, very slowly, right? So it's really just responding to big shifts in dynamics. It's not really catching T's and S's and stuff like that yet. It's really just handling the big stuff. I've got a little bit of makeup gain, but not really that much. Basically just kind of returning the amount that we're attenuating with our gain reduction. From here on out, what we're going to start to see is some more drastic moves with regards to the vocals. So one thing that's really important in your vocal for intelligibility and to just get it to cut through a mix is high end. And I feel like this is a part where a lot of people actually kind of don't go far enough with their high end. Now you can overcook it really easily, but there's a lot of margin there. I usually find with EQ, you've got a 2 or 3 dB kind of margin up or down from wherever you are that you can exist within without it kind of being detrimental to the sound. My next EQ, we're boosting a ton of high end. Check this out. It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Trying by my head and hard to light it. and only time can tell who's right. So those S's and T's are really starting to jump out. That breathiness in the vocal is really starting to jump out. And the way that we're getting that is by enacting a high shelf at 8K, boosting up a good 10 dB of that, so not being shy here at all. We've also got parametric wideband going at around 6K, again, pushing up a good 5-6 dB of that. We've also got another high pass, just taking care of some of the low end that might have been brought up by this saturator and this compressor. And then we've also just got a bit of a dip. I'm usually finding that there's something in the range of about 500 to 900 in the mid-range that I don't like with most vocals. And so in this case, that ended up being around 725-ish. Sometimes it's 700, sometimes 750, even 800 sometimes can be bothersome. It really depends on your vocalist. It also really depends what key you're in. In this case, I've got just a bit of a dip around 3-4 dB at 725, just cleaning up a little bit of that mid-range. Now, the next thing we're going to do is apply some pretty heavy-handed compression. OTT is the place to go for that in Ableton. The way I like to use it is I chuck it on, and I like to mix it in between 10 and 30%. That's kind of my personal butter zone with OTT. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll listen without OTT, and then we'll throw it on. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. And here's with OTT. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. A lot of that breathiness is coming forward again. Again, everything's just getting kind of squashed down, but it's all in reference to the response that we've now created before squashing it. So if we hadn't taken care of a lot of this low end, if we hadn't adjusted the high end the way we have, then all of that stuff the OTT is going to be reacting to. So we don't want that. We want to make sure that our vocal is nice and clean going into a really heavy-handed compressor like the OTT. A really, really good thing to do to have at the end of your line is a de-esser. And I've got this one in Ableton over here. Let's check that out. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Trying by my head and heart collided, and only time can tell who's right. So you can see here based on this graph that a lot of the T's and S's are what the de-esser is reacting to, like it should. And it's taking care of a lot of the problems that you get from boosting tons of high end. A de-esser is absolutely non-negotiable when it comes to this kind of stuff. And it's very important that it is the last thing in your chain. If you're going to go ahead and compress after your de-esser, you're just going to have to de-ess again. So a de-esser is a very important thing to have at the very end of your vocal chain. So this is how my vocal sounds now. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. And what's most important is let's check it out in the track. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Trying by my head and heart collided, and only time can tell who's right. So now it's standing above the track, it's sitting up, it's puffing its chest a little bit, but there's still a little bit of work to be done. And there's a couple more clutch moves that I like to apply to really send it over the top when it comes to vocals, to really make them stand out. One of those things is a flanger. Very, very subtle flanging on a lead vocal, mixed in just to the point where you barely hear it, does absolute wonders for spreading your vocal across the stereo spectrum. As we know, a lead vocal is in most cases a mono source. It is the thing that is right in the middle, right up front, and as such, that's where you park it. In a lot of cases, if we need that to take up more space, we can throw it to a flanger on a return track. And what we're doing is we're mixing it in just to the point where we hear it, and then we're backing it off. So I've got that at around -15 on my send, and we'll check out what that sounds like. So here's my vocal soloed with no flanger. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Now with flanger. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. Now it's so subtle, but it makes a massive difference in the track when you've got everything going. Check this out. I'm going to put it back in the track and you'll see what I'm talking about. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. I just feel like I can hear it a little bit more in my left and right as opposed to just boom, right down the middle, mono, right in my face kind of thing. So if you want to know what the settings are on that flanger, we've got them down here. Funnily enough, I'm actually not using a flanger for this. I'm using a delay. If you want to hear what the flanger sounds like on its own, it sounds like this. Do you wanna live it all behind? It's hard to fight. It's hard to fight. It's very, very subtle, very little movement. You know, there's not really a lot of it, you know, kind of obviously flanging. But when you mix it with the lead vocal, do you wanna live it all behind? It just does something so special in the track. We've also got a little bit of reverb and delay going on. I'll add those into the track now. Here we go. We've got some reverb. And I love Ableton's reverb for this. You know, a couple of seconds, in between 2 and 4 seconds is really all you need in most cases. I like adding a little bit of pre-delay just to make sure that the initial parts of each word aren't kind of being covered up by any reverb. So somewhere between 50 and 100 milliseconds is usually enough for that. Applying any EQ if you need it to the input signal is always a good idea too, making sure there's no low end kind of muddying things up. Also, another thing that I'll play with a lot is the diffusion network. I find that's really valuable for getting reverbs to sound either more lush or more closed down. This is a very, very basic reverb I've got going on. Sounds like this. You know, it's really only a couple of seconds, just kind of giving us a bit of a tail on each word. And the track sounds like this. And then also soloed up on the vocal sounds like this. Cool. Next thing we've got is some delay. Now, my favorite delay in the world is a modulated delay. I love delay that has chorus on it. There's something about that sound to me that just makes delay sound expensive. Here's the vocal with our delay return added to it. It's hard to fight, it's hard to fight. Trying by my head and I collide it. It only time can tell who's right. And again, it's just enough delay to kind of get us to what the next word is. It trails off a fair bit longer than that, but the main sort of meat and potatoes of the delay itself, the immediate repeat after each word, that's where I'm kind of, you know, most of my attention is going. So on our delay, what we've got going on is, again, very simple delay. It is a quarter note delay. I'm offsetting the right side from the left just a little bit so that when we get an initial repeat, it does go stereo immediately. And then I'm processing all of that with just a very, very small amount of chorus, mixing in at 50%. And what that gets us is this very washy, languid style delay. Here's what it sounds like on its own. And here's with the vocal only. It's hard to fight, it's hard to fight. And here it is in the track. Okay, and last but not least, I've got a high frequency exciter. Now, this is something I made in Ableton a little while ago using EQs and some saturation, but basically what it does is it acts sort of like an Aphex exciter where we're not only boosting high end, but we're also distorting it. In cases where I feel like the vocal just needs that extra little dusting of high end, just at the very end after everything's been said and done, just to kind of bring it forward that last little step. So here's the high frequency exciter on its own. It's hard to fight, it's hard to fight. Here it is with the lead vocal. Do you wanna live it or be hide? It's hard to fight, it's hard to fight. And here it is in the track. Do you wanna live it or be hide? It's hard to fight, it's hard to fight. Trying by my head and I collide it. And only time can tell who's right. Cool, and just so we can get some perspective on it, here's no high frequency exciter. With it. Yeah, you know, it just gives us that last little push over the cliff, to quote Spinal Tap. So these are some of the steps I take on my lead vocals to get them to really stand up inside of a mix. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking and subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you can be notified when more videos like this come out. Also, this session is going to be available for download for a meager $5. If you're interested in supporting the channel, that's the best way to do it. My name is Jordan. Thank you so much for sticking around. We'll see you soon.